today we're going to look at scatter plots, and we're going to look at associations or trends or relationships in this set of data. And so scatter plots are graphs that use points to display sets of data. Sets of data with two variables, or we call this bivariate data. You know, like bicycle, bi means two, right? Scatter plots can help determine if one variable has an effect on the other, or if there are overall trends, patterns, or correlations between the variables. So trends, patterns, correlations, those all mean the same thing. Okay, so here's an example. Susie went to the mall, surveyed some shoppers, and she created a scatter plot. And the first question says, how many shoppers did Susie survey? Well, I know I was a little confused when I read that, but each point represents how many people Susie surveyed. So let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Looks like we have about 16 people that Susie surveyed. And it says, does the number of items purchased seem to have an effect on the amount of money the shopper spent? And I'm going to say yes, that there does seem to be an effect on this, because if you notice, as the number of items purchased goes up, so as the number of items purchased goes up, the total spent actually goes up as well. Okay? And we also could draw a trend line through this data. A trend line is just one linear line that represents it. And so our trend line might kind of look something like that. Most of the data seems to be going in a pattern like that. So let's talk about the different types of associations. And I want to tell you that, again, association is another word for a trend or a correlation, all those words that we have listed at the top. So it says two variables have a positive association when the variables move up. That's what I'm going to say. So for example, as one variable increases, the other variable also increases. And we could also think of this as having a positive slope. Again, if I'm going to draw my trend line through the middle of the data, that's a positive slope. One thing is going up, the other thing is going up. One set of data is going up, the other variable is going up. Two variables have a negative association when the variables move down or in a negative direction. So for example, as one variable increases, the other variable is actually decreasing. Okay? Again, we could draw a trend line through the middle of the data, and that represents a negative slope, right? As the x goes up, the y variable goes down. And then sometimes we have no association, no relationship, no correlation. They have no association when the change in one variable has no effect. And if you'll look, this is just a random scatter plot. The numbers are all over the place. There's not an obvious positive trend or an obvious negative trend. Okay, so now let's think about this. Describe the type of association you'd expect to see between the following: the hours a person studies and the number of states they've visited. Okay, so if a person studies a lot, is that going to make the number of states go up or go down? Well, I hope you're thinking there's no association here. There's no relationship. I don't think we would find any kind of positive or negative trend if we're comparing how much we study and the states we visited. Okay, what about B? The hours a person studies and their grade on an exam. Well, as we study more, what do you think is supposed to happen with our grade? Do you think our grade is going to get higher, or do you think it's going to get lower? I hope you're thinking higher. We know sometimes that doesn't happen. So if both of those things are increasing, then that is a positive association or trend. Okay, the next one says the hours a person studies and the hours they spend watching TV. Well, let's think about this. If we study a lot, what do you think happens to the time we spend watching TV? If we're studying a lot, we don't have time to watch TV, so I'm going to assume that our time on the TV goes down, and so that would be an example of a negative association. Okay? Okay, now let's talk about some trend lines. It says, if a straight line can be drawn to follow the overall trend of a scatterplot, then it is a linear relationship. If we can draw a straight line, then it is a linear relationship. If the points of data are close together, the association is strong. And that isn't something you're really going to have to do, but it would be strong if the points are really close together. And if the points of data are widely spread, the association is weak. So if the points are far away from each other, then it's going to be a weaker relationship. Now, I also want us to think about, I want us in these graphs to draw our trend line. And a trend line is just a line that we're drawing to describe our data. And we want to draw this line, we want to draw it through the middle of our data, and we want it to have an equal amount of points above and below the line. Okay? Now, first off, let's look at this points. So I think we see that this is going in an upward trend. As one is increasing, the other is increasing. So I hope you're seeing that this is a positive association. I would say the points are pretty close together, so this is a strong positive. And let's look at what a good trend line would be. So I want to aim for the middle of my points, and I want to try to get as many points above it as below it. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ooh, I maybe could have lowered my graph just a little bit. Okay, but that's important because we're going to use that trend line to help us make predictions. Okay, this graph, this is still going to end up being a positive trend. But notice that the points are a little bit more spread out. So I would say that this is a weak positive. Okay, let's look at how we would draw our trend line. So again, we want to kind of aim for the middle. And I've got just about an equal amount above and below the line. Now this one is looking curved, right? But we don't want to draw a curved line. This is still going to be linear. It's still positive. I don't know, I think the points are pretty close together, so I'm going to say this is a strong positive. But let's look at how we might draw our line. This is a little trickier. Maybe we might draw our line to look a little bit like that. Okay, so you remember, you don't want to necessarily follow the curve of the line. We just want to follow that. And it is a little bit curved, so you could potentially say that this is not linear. So, and actually we probably should say that. This is not linear because of that curve. This would actually be what we call exponential. Okay, so that's not a positive. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, this one is going in a downward trend, so this is negative. I feel like the points are pretty close together, so I would say strong. And let's draw our trend line. Again, through the middle of the data. So, you know, you're not going to hit every point on that line. I could have maybe even lowered that just a little bit to make it a little more equal. Okay. This one, it's kind of looking negative, but it does have a little bit of a curve to it. So I'm going to say this one is not linear. And this one is all scattered around, so this is not linear either. And this one would have no association. Okay? Hope that's kind of giving you an idea. Okay, so we're going to describe the type of association. A person's height and a person's shoe size. Okay, as a person's height goes up, what do you think happens to their shoe size? You should be thinking that it probably gets bigger. I mean, at some point it's going to stop, but for the most part, that would be a positive trend. Okay, the number of letters in a person's last name. So as it goes up, is a person's IQ going to go up or down based on the letters in their last name? I mean, I hope not, because I have a really short last name. This is going to be no association. There's not going to be any relationship. If we were to graph that data, we would see points all over the place. Okay, the number of absences a student has. So as the absences go up, what do you think is going to happen to their GPA or their grades? Most likely, the more absences you have, the lower your GPA is going to be. So that is a negative trend. Okay, so that's what you need to be thinking about each time. As the first variable increases, what happens to the second variable? If it goes up, it's positive. If it goes down, it's negative. If there's just no relationship whatsoever, then it's no association. Okay, this says to match our scatter plot with its possible description. So let's look at our answer choices. It says the temperature outside and the total gallons of gas sold at a gas station. Yeah. As the temperature goes up, what do you think is going to happen to the gas sold? Do you think it's going to increase or decrease based on that? I'm not sure. Let's look at B. The size of a home, as it goes up, the cost of monthly utilities for the home. So if you have a big house, do you think your electric bill is going to increase or decrease? And the answer is increase, right? So this is a positive trend. As one goes up, the other goes up. And so which graph has a positive trend? Well, that's number 9, right? So number 9 is B. Okay, let's look at C. The altitude of a hiker and the total oxygen level in the air. So as the hiker gets higher, the total amount of oxygen, what happens as you climb a mountain? The oxygen level goes down. So that is a negative trend. Which graph shows a negative trend? This one right here. So C, and then that means that number 10 was no correlation, and so it's a random pattern. Okay? So what you're going to do now is you're going to practice identifying the type of trends or relationships, and you're going to practice identifying what the data means.